I am here today because of important reasons that have moved me to present this video. It is important to pass on such information to you. I am well known worldwide in matters of world harmony, so I build spherical harmony systems, the SHA. They are known from me. I have given 3 lectures now. The first was about world peace. World peace on the way. The second thing I included in this trilogy, where I talked a lot about my sphere harmony, what I have always achieved was fear. Must change sides, change sides. And now my third attempt in this sphere harmony is the world is waking up. The world is waking up. This means at the moment we are slowly experiencing a pole shift, a rise or weakening of the Earth's magnetic field, and there have been many experiments conducted in these areas where people are then on the threshold where they then wake up. The sphere harmony devices, which I built back then and continue to build, serve to open the heart chakras, remove fear so that people then awaken, and to strengthen the pineal gland that we have. This pineal gland is calcified due to fluoride through various influences. There are many. I show in a small video by Dieter Browers, who shows it correctly, where the hack points are located. I give the exercise for this, the Magid's exercise, which opens up the chakra and also essentially brings the 2 brain halves into harmony and balance, so that these pineal gland is, so to speak, reactivated. A simple exercise. Can you close your eyes and imagine colors? For example, a green. If you can visualize this green or blue or yellow or violet. You see it vividly in front of your eyes. This means the pineal gland is truly active and it is not calcified. If you only see black, then it's high time to do something about it. Studies show that in Africa, only 5% have the problem. In Europe, meanwhile, 80% of people are affected where the pineal gland is simply calcified. My purpose today, why I'm here, why I'm making this video, it's very important. I just came from Namibia, where I conducted a sphere harmony, and I built an acupuncture device because the drought has set in and is really severe. I built a setup at Swokumotainalage, and then I saw they get flattened. Flattened, why? Because there are uranium mines in open cast mining, explosions, 2-3 a day, and a lot of dust, uranium dust in the air. And all this causes the drought energy to become stronger. I would also do that in an accompanying video here, which explains exactly from Bernsenf how important this is, this uranium. Because Wilhelm Reich conducted the ORANUR experiment back then, where he discovered this. He has a book. He has observations and studies have been made about it, which are really very, very serious and should be taken seriously. In relation to illness and on-door production from a few devices currently in circulation, I want to address this as well. There are currently devices called NHS, nature harmony stations that, for example, also have an orgone component on a pipes are wrapped where many radioactive particles adhere due to the chemtrails being sprayed, such as radium, strontium and such. And this really causes, for example, an agitation of nature up to the point of nature's paralysis as to lifelessness. And this lifelessness affects animals, humans, cells, whatever, also influences the weather and is a total illness. The people who have it I won't mention the name of the inventor and so on who were with me. They also recently in Stuttgart in the Mercure Hotel, just sitting among the audience trying to grasp some knowledge from me, but they are building the complete opposite. Let's begin. I will not claim that they know what they are doing there. They are certainly doing it for a good cause. But I have dealt with these installations. I have the same, built them and then tested them. And then I discovered something very, very negative. That's why I don't call them natural harmony stations, but negative harmony stations. I warned the people who have them now, the 1,000, to remove the organ part. Why? Will you imagine the same in the next video, which I will now insert here from Bernd Senf, which, for example, Uranus-effect is, or through the experiments in 1951 by Wilhelm Reich and by Bernd Senf, today being revisited.
And against the backdrop of the then Korean War, which threatened to escalate into a nuclear war, he had asked himself whether orgone energy, and particularly concentrated orgone energy, anti-nuclear radiation, when Reich asked himself if this could possibly also use concentrated orgone energy to alleviate or even neutralize potential and imminent radiation damage in a possible nuclear war. And for that case, he had then used an exceptionally strong orgone accumulator. Oh, wrong. With the insulator, the last time I believe, and metal, I painted the metal blue here last time, and the insulator, if I remember correctly, like this here. Even just such a double layer allows this energy from the space here to condense, and the degree of condensation continues to grow with the increasing number of these layers, that is, of metal and insulator. And while he, for his medical treatment, had used 3 double layers, for the Uranus experiment, but I won't draw it out completely here now, otherwise the evening will be filled with just that. He used 20 double layers. So in 20-fold uranium orgone accumulator, and brought in a rather small amount of radioactive substance, namely 1 milligram of radium, to see if in the interaction, if something noticeable can be observed in the interaction between highly concentrated orgone energy and radium. What then occurred completely surprised him in its strength, in its intensity. He had not expected that at all. I explained that in more detail last time. He ultimately interpreted it as a high excitation of the highly concentrated orgone energy field inside. It had entered a state of overstimulation, of agitation, and just as the orgone energy itself passes through all matter and only perhaps can be slowed down, so to speak, in its spread, but cannot really be completely shielded. For Grunde, this effect of the agitated energy would have gone through the walls and would have finally also affected the living organisms. So up to the people who were involved in the experiment there and who were present in the building, brought into a state of extreme overexcitation, bioenergetic overexcitation. This is only symbolic here with a yes, for example, single-celled organisms. But we had learned, according to Reich's concept, despite all the differences between single-celled and multi-celled organisms, small animals and large animals, and up to humans, there would be a functional identity. Functional identity with simultaneous differences. I discussed this last time here in various. So let's take the one or the bion we talked about here. Then it was the single cell organism here, then plants, animals, humans, and so on. And finally, yes, up to the organism Earth, up to the living organism Earth. And here, in the other direction, I didn't mention this last time, it even goes into the subatomic areas, namely down to, for example, the electron. Everyone also has their life energy component, and if this function is fundamentally disrupted, for example, stirred up by this ORANUR effect, then all of them will be affected living organisms and systems embedded in this energy field are catapulted into this state of overexcitement, one might say, and initially experience certain functional disorders. Reich had discovered that every organism is most severely affected by this, as he called it, ORANUR disease at its bioenergetic weak point, particularly in the areas of greatest emotional, physical, and bioenergetic blockages or congestion. And in this respect, this ORANUR effect, as he called it, then also impacted all living systems and organisms here. The first experience he had with it was when he entered the lab room himself after 5 hours and was completely knocked out, so to speak, was completely shaken. And his colleagues felt similarly when they went in. This couldn't have been caused by just 1 milligram of radium, especially since he removed it and stored it a few hundred meters away. There was nothing particularly dramatic anywhere in the vicinity of the radium itself. The accumulator was still virtually glowing. It continued to have an effect. And I had then said he did that over months, more and more systematically, then experimented with how the reaction is, this interaction between this and that. Last time the focus was mainly on the connection to various forms of bioenergetic diseases. A tendency he had observed initially in test animals in the adjacent room, which he wanted to include in other experiments. All of them had died under the influence of the ORANUR effect. The effect had passed through the wall. And they showed giant symptoms of leukemia. This means Reich discovered a connection between this intense stimulation of life energy and leukemia. So, blood cancer, while other forms of cancer were interpreted by him as a consequence of chronic bioenergetic and emotional blockage, rigidification, contraction, shrinking biopathy as he called it, He interpreted leukemia as an expression and consequence of this ORANUR reaction, this overexcited state of energy. I had also pointed out that he had already observed various damage, diseases, including those of plants. The phenomenon of forest dieback or tree die-off came into his focus and understanding in this context. It even went as far as a structural decay of rocks, the stones of his house, whose surface decayed structurally, and then into very strange black, transformed into shapes. This was the term melanor, meaning structural decay of rocks. We will come back to it later, as he hypothesized in this context at least, that there was even a structural disintegration of water molecules, that is H2O, initially under the influence of ORANUR and then turning into the opposite, namely into the state he had called DOR. I also want to quickly paint the picture here again. If this is the natural pulsation and the flow of life energy symbolizes, then the ORANUR state could be illustrated pictorially and symbolically with this. And Reich's observation after several weeks of this Oranureffect repeatedly was that it then tipped into the lifelessness. So this was Orgone, living Orgone energy. This was ORANUR. That's shifted a bit too far to the right here. And this here was DOR, Deadly Orgone, an abbreviation that he coined himself. And as a result of this tipping into DOR, various processes of illnesses have just occurred, which I described in more detail last time, also related to plants, trees, tree death, and as mentioned, even the structural decay of water molecules in his interpretation. That means water would not dissolve into nothing, but neither water vapor nor liquid would remain from the water. It would have disappeared. As water, it would have disappeared. And that would be an effect of drying out, of dehydration. So if living organisms enter such an environment, they are essentially deprived of water, not through evaporation, not only through excretion, but through the decomposition of the molecular structure, through the disintegration of the molecular structure of water. Here in the edition from the publishing house, 2001, a few years ago, that is, or the title mentioned here, The Primordial Uranium Experiment, in parenthesis Roman numeral 1. Simple cover. It couldn't be simpler. But what is contained between those two book covers is of immense importance. And as I said, the experimental setup is also precisely described there. The experiment protocols are documented and the interpretations of them. This is also about the observation with the Geiger-Müller counter, with the orgone-charged Geiger-Müller counter, which I only briefly mentioned here. And these are the essential basics. So the experimental foundations of a deeper understanding of this type of bioenergetic disorder. Another manifestation, so to speak, unlike chronic rigidity or blocking or armoring, it goes in the other direction. Chronic or initially overexcitation, which can then also become chronic. And Wilhelm Reich called it the Orgone effect.
Yes, I will briefly sketch out NHS. A sphere harmony device of mine ranges from 3 meters in diameter up to 6, 7, 8 and has a length of the antennas 6 meter. The sphere harmony device is indeed more expensive and such. If you now need 20 for Germany to achieve more stability than in Algeria regarding peace and harmony and no fear in the hearts and in the people. And a better functioning of the pineal gland, the most important organ that we humans have, which really produces this DMT, and through melatonin.
The healthy ones have a high melatonin level and the schizophrenics a very weak one. This also clearly correlates. Just so you understand how incredibly important this melatonin really is and that it can be produced. For this, it is important to have a proper pineal gland function.
My installation, they are tested, they work properly, and you can visit them wherever they are. And then from an organ winding here, I know a few windings. That's this oracle from Wilhelm Reich. Also, and then here, and then there's a plastic bucket here. And he simply makes a virtual pyramid here, simply yes. Plastic here is harmful, so to speak. The resonators, that is the Kozyrev technique, which is very expensive with me, is reduced here to a let's say chip, as you call it, or such a aluminum foil. Yes, here is water, here is somehow a spiral, approximately how I did it on a larger scale, but the most important part, which is very harmful, is here. This is produced by this uranium, because if particles from the chemtrails stick here, yes, from radium or uranium or strontium, that is pure radioactivity. And they are also somehow in the pipe here. And that really causes everything to turn death, nausea, liveliness, and even to freezing in nature.
Our topic from last week was repeatedly the NHS, that is the Nature Harmony Station. It has the ability to harmonize the sky, thereby neutralizing chemtrails. There are, unfortunately, disagreements in the scene regarding the ORANUR effect. Majid Abdelaziz from the Desert Greening Project attacks the NHS and claims it is a negative harmony station. This involves the ORANUR effect, which Wilhelm Reich discovered. He positioned 1 milligram of radium in the center of an orgone accumulator, and the result was an amplification of the orgone energy. Anyone within range of the experiment experienced this intensification as a strong internal restlessness. After a certain time, the intensification collapsed and began to form there, that is, deadly orgone energy, deadly organ. If one were not to react, it would lead to a dissemination of the deadly life energy, and thus to the wanton killing of the surrounding landscape and its living beings. That's the initial situation. After I introduced this setup in the Friday broadcast on Good Friday, I received a comment related to a video by Desert Greening, in which Mr. Abd El-Aziz accuses the NHS of being a negative establishment, which I could not leave unaddressed. As an honest journalist and researcher, I contacted the creators of the NHS, and on Wednesday evening, I was fortunate to have a detailed conversation with one of them.
Yes, there is the risk of the uranium prime effect, but only if the facility is not maintained properly. In other words, left alone and nothing more is done. And why is that? Radioactive particles fall from the chemtrails to the ground because this dirt has to go somewhere. It contains, among other things, aluminum, barium and strontium, as well as other nanoparticles, which are relatively small in mass. When they come down, some also reach the space inside the pipe of the facility, and over time, this can lead to this uranium ore effect. Now comes a point that is very individual and also depends on the location of the facility. If you live in a region where a lot is sprayed, a lot also comes down. When the critical mass of the radioactive material is reached, it first starts to resonate, and at the latest then, you have to react. First, the facility must be cleaned, the water in the tub changed, and the outside of the facility must also be sprayed or cleaned. All particles should be removed as thoroughly as possible. Second, once this facility is cleaned, it needs water in the basin again. And here we must be careful, because the most important thing is coming. Now, the system must be grounded with the grounding wire and grounding rod, and the ground there should always be moist. Let the water simply overflow and look to see where the lowest area is. Position the grounding cable there, because through the grounding and the moisture, potential door goes directly into the earth. Removed. You should regularly check the water, as the system should not run dry. Operators should check the water level daily or every 2 days and refill water if necessary until it overflows at the lowest point and moistens the ground. An equally important aspect is the alignment of the installation according to the cardinal directions. Here, it is important to position the wires of the installation, which form a virtual pyramid, along the north-south direction on the longer side, not the peaks but the lengths, just like the Great Pyramid of Giza. According to the designers, the aspect of normal radioactivity is irrelevant. It is so low that it has no impact. Even though a significant amount of radiation was released due to a reactor accident in Norway, it also has no effect on the facilities and their operation. The important thing is simply the cleanliness with which you perform your maintenance. If everything is clean, nothing can happen. If a uranium primary effect announces itself, you feel it through the agitated and stimulated orgone. In that case, act immediately and clean the system carefully. My conclusion: these systems are effective and efficient. Considering the price of a kit at 195 euros compared to 10,000 to 35,000 euros for a sphere harmony system, the cost-performance ratio clearly favors the NHS. Moreover, there are more and more rumors that these sphere harmony devices stop working after a short time. But be careful, these are just rumors that I have not yet been able to verify and, to be honest, not verify once. From my perspective, it is very senseless to make life difficult for each other within the alternative scene. Here I would find it much better to leave one's ego behind and agree on the smallest common denominator. A clean earth with clean air and clean water. That should be our common vision.